Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Bobboom. As you know, or if you're new to my channel, as you will learn, I enjoy giving out advice. When people tend to ask me for help, it's not necessarily out of arrogance. If I don't know what to do in life, I don't know what to do. I am not a perfect person. I have made wrong steps in my life, and I wish I could go back and maybe take different paths, but that's just the way it is. So, right now, I'm going to be telling you kind of how my career life has gone based on how popular the Gamestop videos were. And I want you to kind of, I guess, take something from this. It doesn't have to be a very specific message I'm trying to send you. Of course, I will have my own message that I want you to take from this, but I want you to go away from listening to this as someone who's just become a little bit more wise to the way the world works. So, career wise, I am working on some things. I'm currently in school. If you've never listened to a previous video of mine about how just depressing the job market is, I highly suggest it. I will leave a link for it. A lot of people looked at that and they thought to themselves, "This is really eye-opening. You know, this helps me out a lot." And that's what I like reading. It's not me patting myself on the back. It's not me trying to be arrogant about it, but just knowing that there are other people out there that have taken wrong steps in life that wish to try and push themselves in a different direction. That's the part that matters. So. One of the very first jobs that I ever had growing up was being a camp counselor. I went to the camp beforehand as a kid every summer, and eventually when I was old enough to apply to become a camp counselor, I figured I'd be a shoo-in, and technically I kind of was. A lot of people knew who I was. They I guess, kind of trusted me for a bit. But being a camp counselor had a little bit more of a social stigma to it. Camp counselors tend to be teenagers or a little bit higher, and when I was a teenager, I didn't get along with a whole lot of other teenagers simply because I guess they tended to worry about the things that I didn't worry about. They cared more about their social status and everything like that more than anything else, and me, I'm kind of the person I don't care. I don't care. You want to go impress that person, whether it be a man or a chick or whatever. That's fine. I like who I like. You do your own thing. So being a camp counselor felt more like I was stepping into something that was just being paid for being in high school. All of my coworkers were my age. All of them acted like typical teenagers would. And eventually, these social circles that were developed kind of didn't help, because the social circle that was developed between some of those teenagers were also with the guy who did the paychecks, right? The guy who did the paychecks, he was a coach, really big into sports, a whole bunch of other kind of stuff. I wasn't really big into the whole sports thing. I just didn't care. But all right, fine. That's your own thing. But the other camp counselors, they were kind of into it. That kind of helped shoo them in eventually, and then eventually I got laid off. I was one of the first people that they laid off because I hired too many camp counselors, because I guess essentially they didn't need me. I even met some of the kids afterwards at that camp. A lot of those kids really did. They loved me. They loved the way that I approached them. They loved the way that I heard out their problems, the way that I talked to them as if they were on the same level as me. I treated a lot of those kids as a camp counselor should, as a friend. A lot of these other camp counselors, they tended to bring their MP3 players and CD disc tracks, whatever was popular at the time, and that was their thing. A good instance of one of the most memorable, actually, instances of me being a camp counselor was back when this new kid came to the camp. It's already been close to around a month that the camp has been open. And this parent came up to me and said, "Hey, look," because the parents, when they bring in the kids, they have an opportunity to meet the camp counselor or whatever, and said, "Hey, look, my kid's kind of shy. He's going to be new here, and I was wondering if you kind of keep an eye on him. And I was like, look, I have a plan for that, and I know this is going to seem kind of weird at first, but just bear with me on this. And he kind of looks at me, and is like, okay. And I looked down at him. I was like, okay, well, hey, what are you into? What do you like? Like, what's your favorite TV show? What are your hobbies and stuff like that? And it was typical kind of stuff. He liked Yu-Gi-Oh at the time and all this other kind of stuff. Well, hey man, that's perfect. I got tons of kids out here that play Yu-Gi-Oh. Watch Power Rangers and stuff. Keep in mind that these are 8 to 10 year olds, right? I mean, it life isn't that complicated for their needs and wants. But I said, hey, attention up, everybody, pay attention over here, over here. This is so and so. He's new at the camp. I want you guys to give him a warm welcome. And guess what? He tells me that he's into Yu-Gi-Oh! And he enjoys this and all this other kind of stuff. Immediately, 5 other kids came up to him and started talking to him like there was no problem. Like, the kid was immediately welcomed. And I kid you not, within that week, he was already hanging out with people. He already had his own little... he was already in his own like little groups and everything like that, and things were sorted out. He wasn't alone. He was no longer a new kid right out of the gate, because all of these kids, they've all been in the same shoes that he has. So many times there were several times outside of that camp that I met some of those kids, and they were like, "Hey, I remember you. Why did they fire you? Why?" And it's like, well, I don't know what to tell you. They decided to pick me to lay off. They didn't pay attention to what I was doing as far as a job. They only cared about the social circle. They only cared about if they personally liked me or not specifically what I was doing as far as work. So being a camp counselor, I learned some things from it. I wasn't perfect at it, but I did try. Being a camp kid myself, I tried to be, I guess, what they needed. And, it worked for a little while. But as far as a summer job goes, it wouldn't be too bad, just as long as you stay on your toes and listen to the parents' concerns and things like that. And believe it or not, that father walked away with a smile knowing that his kid was going to be in good hands. I mean, he had to go to work and everything because he was dropping him off, but he was definitely in good hands. After that, as I got older, I was kind of looking for, I guess, a more steady job, which ended up being working at a movie theater. Working at a movie theater did definitely have its perks. Yes, you can see movies for free, pretty much all you want. If you have a day off, you can go into a movie theater and stay there all day to watch any movie you want, as far as stuff that's playable. Hell, I've even seen some stories of people hooking up video game systems to some of the projectors and just playing a video game system on this massive movie screen. I digress, though. It was a terrible job with terrible hours. They constantly demanded a lot. And I don't really want to give out the company's name, but I can. It begins with an A and ends with a C. At the time, it was a little bit after Katrina. Of course, I was still kind of old. I was in high school. I needed some steady income. I never saw myself staying there. And it was actually the first time that I ever outright quitted a job. I just outright quit that job because I hated it. You couldn't feed me all of the free popcorn in the world. You couldn't give me all of the free movies in the world to make me keep working that dead-end job. And it's amazing. I've been to that movie theater last year once. I rarely ever go to a movie theater these days. And I saw people, I recognized people that I used to work with. And this is years and years and years. And now all of a sudden they're like a management position. But they look so tired. They look abused and used. They look miserable. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles. They saw an opportunity to step up into the world, and I guess they took it. And if they're happy, they're happy. That's what they want. That's what they get. As far as the actual workplace goes, it was frantic. every single weekend was a nightmare. When you have a movie theater that has about 20 screens, think about all the people from the surrounding cities and stuff like that are going to want to come in, constantly selling food at the register and everything like that. It was so bad. It got so busy. This one lady came up to me, and despite how tired I was, despite how draining everything was, I treated her with the absolute respect that any other person would, I guess, demand. And she gave me a $20 tip. We're not really supposed to accept tips, I said, so please hold on to it. And she goes, look, if they say anything, tell them to come to me. I didn't think I left that much of an impression on a person, but thank you, ma'am. Like, thank you. Like, there's no way I could repay that amount of kindness. I mean, you saw how hard I was working. You saw how polite I was trying to be, despite all of the hard work and stress, and you rewarded me for it. Thank you so much. I don't know your name, and I don't really remember how you look all that much, but you really did help me out, and you really helped, I guess, my morale. Then after this AMC bit happened, or at least right before it, the day that I decided to quit, I had the biggest shit-eating grin on my face at school. The other students, my peers, looked at me and were like, why do you have that face? Like, why are you so happy today? Like, this is definitely different from the narcissistic, sarcastic asshat that we are used to knowing. And I just smile and I say, today I'm quitting my job. I even had one of them look at me and say, why are you happy about that? Why? This is completely opposite of how a person should feel. You're not going to have a job anymore. I was like, no, dude, I'm quitting my job. Like, this is the greatest feeling ever. It just feels like there's just this massive weight being taken, off your chest. You're no longer walking around with this albatross knowing that you have this really just terrible job. And of course, I couldn't really, I guess, sacrifice it so much, but I was still young. I still had wiggle room to make mistakes. And so I decided to take it. Eventually, money did kind of get a little hard, which is why I eventually ended up working for Gamestop. And of course, if you want to know all about Gamestop, I will leave a link for that as well in the description. That is one of my most viewed videos on my channel, and I still get comments on it to this very day. So please go listen to Gamestop, working for Gamestop, The Tragedy. It is a fantastic listen. I've even listened back to it recently and had a good laugh because I forgot how it even went, like at least how I explained things. I digress. After working for Gamestop, I went to work at a chemical storage warehouse. And it wasn't just chemical storage. I was also expected to mix these chemicals, work the forklifts, store the chemicals, properly label the chemicals, etc., etc. It was a one-man doing, I'm going to say, three-man job. Essentially, this guy was making things like detergents. He was making things like hand soaps, hand sanitizers. I mean, I remember being proud of one batch of hand sanitizer that I made. This sounds so weird, okay? I remember being proud of this massive batch of hand sanitizer because the pallet was fresh. All of the bottles were cleaned. Everything was freshly labeled and packaged and everything. I'm like, damn, I did a good day's work. And really, that job was just about as bad as the movie theater job. And I definitely did make my mistakes at that job. Eventually, they wanted me to repark a company van, but unfortunately, the company van was this special type of chemical storage van. I wasn't really certified to drive it, but they needed me to kind of park it, and I ended up getting one of the back tires kind of stuck in a ditch because there's no rear view mirror. The entire back area is just metal wall because, chemical storage. The whole van is designed for chemical storage to transport. So there's no proper rear view mirror. I ended up fucking up and a tire went into a ditch. Boss was like, oh man, that's an honest mistake. You know what happens. You're not used to driving a van. But then kind of some more things started happening. There were some changes in the company's safety code that were required specific stickers to be put on, and I forgot to put stickers on them, and so that's kind of another mark. The most major mark that kind of happened at that chemical warehouse job was the day, and I'm not fishing for pats on the back or that feel bro. I'm not fishing for, sympathy on this, but it was the day after my father died. Essentially, this man that, and this is a tidbit into my life a little bit here. So my father, I didn't really grow up with him. I did not grow up with the guy, but later in my life as an adult, I did eventually reconnect with him. I did actually get to stay in contact with him for about 3 years. And because a lot of the hard work that I was pushing at this chemical warehouse job, I kind of let time slide by, and I forgot to call him, to stay in touch with him. It was on the back of my mind. And one day I finally get this call saying that he died. Oh shit, well, I didn't know what to feel or what to say or what to think. And eventually the very next day at work, I kind of kept it to myself. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't say anything, but there was an accident, essentially. I mixed an acid with a base, which caused a bit of a chemical explosion. Not a fiery kind of explosion, but just like the kind of reactive Mentos inside a Diet Coke bottle kind of reactive. Essentially, I misread one of the labels because a lot of things just going on in my head, and I went to go pour it into the vat, and the whole vat just shot up into the air. Luckily, I was not wearing safety glasses or anything like that because, let me rephrase that. Luckily, because I wasn't wearing any safety glasses, I was able to just turn my head fast enough, and none of it got in my eyes because that would have been serious. And I told my boss about it. I'm like, look, I didn't tell him why I made the mess up. And I'm like, look, I'm sorry. I misread one of the labels, and I'm just really exhausted right now. I'm sorry, And he's like, well, at least he put a positive spin on it to make me feel better. But it was kind of the final straw as far as that job went, and he definitely fired me. But he told me that batch, since I threw an acid into that batch, it was intended to be a laundry detergent. And you're not supposed to have acids in a laundry detergent because it's going to eat away at the clothes. Also, people's skin, just a little bit as an irritant. He said, well, I guess I'll just send that batch over to the local prison. And he did have deals with them. So, yeah, sure. All right. Local prison, let them itch it up. But after the chemical warehouse, I ended up working for an insulator, an industrial insulator at that. It wasn't just house insulation messing with people's ceilings and walls or anything like that. We're talking about billion upon billion dollar industry units and things like that. Piping, steam tracing, stuff that gets to thousands upon thousands of degrees, and it wasn't that bad. It was definitely hard work, but I eventually kind of threw myself under the bus on that one because I started getting kind of sick and I never went to the doctor. So the more I started calling in sick, the more of a reason they gave to lay me off. Unfortunately, it was a pretty decent moneymaker. It started at $15 an hour and it ended up going into about $17 an hour at the end of my first year, which is not that bad, especially considering you have a decent amount of overtime. You don't want too much overtime because they'll tax the hell out of you. But when you do have enough of that overtime on it, that's a sweet paycheck. And it wasn't bi-weekly either. It was weekly. Every week you got a paycheck. We were also allowed to leave for lunch. So, going to Subway and things like that. It was fantastic. As far as the work goes, a lot of heavy lifting, wearing fire-resistant clothing, which gets kind of heavy during the summer and stuff like that. You're going to sweat a lot. You might even bleed because there might be an accident. You might cut your hand or you might crush it with a hammer. Who knows? But it was actual hard work, and it put a lot of things into perspective for me because I began to understand just where my money was going, just where things, I guess, as far as paychecks and my life was going. I began to understand what a real work ethic is like. And being an insulator, it doesn't have to be that, but if you ever did get a construction job of some kind, I would really suggest just putting your mind out there to at least getting a construction job, so you can at least see where I'm coming from and see where a lot of other people are coming from. When you think of hard-earned money, you're going to be thinking about your money, and you're going to be keeping track of where every dollar goes. Unfortunately, after my layoff, not trying to get sympathy points here, but this is where the wrong step goes, right? And when I told you about changing the path and direction you wanted to go, my girlfriend at the time broke up with me. There was this one time where we were at this store, and I haven't had a job for like 2.5 months after that job, essentially laid me off or fired me, whatever way you want to put it. And we were at this store. I went to go buy a $15 shirt, and we're standing in line. There are people behind us, and my card was declined for a $15 shirt. I can't even to this day fathom just how bad that feels. That's a deep, dark hole that you do not want to be in. That is a terrible, absolutely terrible feeling. And thankfully, to family, I have not, really given up on myself. Thanks to friends, I have not really given up on myself. There's always another way. I didn't have to step into the whole government help system or anything like that. I've always found a way to kind of dig myself out of that hole. That one time in that line trying to buy that shirt was a bit of a wake-up call. It was, and then her breaking up with me was even a bigger wake-up call. It was a shot of caffeine to the system. Like, what is going on with my life? What should I be doing right now? And I just started filling out tons of job applications. I started looking at how school could go on. And luckily for me, the next semester going into spring will be my last semester for school. I will actually have a degree. It's not something I'm entirely going to love, but I know it pays well, and I know I'll actually be able to have a quiet life. And that's really what I'm looking forward to, is just kind of doing my own thing in life right now, being career driven. But after being an insulator, other than the whole school thing, I went with a temp agency. Do not ever join a temp agency. They will suck you dry in the bad way. They take a portion of your paycheck as a thank you for hooking you up with that job. Say the job pays $13 an hour. This company is like, we will pay $13 an hour for someone to take this job position. Please hook us up with somebody. The temp agency says, hey, we know somebody. You go into the interview. If you get picked, you could contractually agree to them taking like $3 an hour out of your paycheck, which is the thing that I accepted. Now, being a lab tech is not strenuous at all. It is possibly the laziest job that I have had so far when it comes to, I guess, physical exertion, right? You're kind of always in a computer chair, you're checking samples, you might wash something off, but you're never really sweating. You're always in this air-conditioned environment being a lab tech, and our job was to simply just test coal samples for barges, like big barges. Like, we're talking things that bring upon tons and tons and tons of coal. We check how flammable they are, what BTU units, a whole bunch of other kind of stuff. We check and see how dirty it is compared to other samples and what they're looking for, etc., etc. Eventually, with that job, there was a kind of a nail in the coffin. With me being a temp, they could have fired me at any moment if they felt like they didn't need me. I went in there and I said, hey, look, I'm starting up school. This is my school schedule, and this is going to be very important to me. So I don't know what to tell you. Well, within that very next week, they let me know that they were laying me off. And I was on good grounds with the guy who signed my paychecks, technically. He was a good guy. He knew that I worked hard. He knew that I was willing to learn. There wasn't really anything complicated going on. In fact, actually, there was nothing complicated going on. There was no drama. But, you know, there comes a time where you as an employer have to put your foot down. And unfortunately, I ended up getting the exit door for that job because I wanted to take school. Well, I don't really regret that so far. So far, so good. After after losing my lab tech job, I was kind of jobless for a little while again. I had to stay on my tippy toes with what I was using my money for. This time I was not going to go back into that deep dark hole. This time I told myself I was not going to stretch things too far. I was kind of arrogant with my money after being an insulator because I had a good bit of it, and before you know it, it kind of just drained out fast because I was still buying things like food and all this other kind of stuff. But this time I tried learning my lesson and I stretched it out a little while. Eventually, there was a job listing on Facebook from an old acquaintance for being emergency medical, and that's what I currently am. Technically, if I had to be absolutely technical about it, I am head of medical on the weekends. I don't know where I went to try and get this title, but technically I am head of medical on the weekends for a private company. I have seen things and I have done things that I have never wanted or expected to do. I have been asked things that I really don't need to know your medical history. I don't need to know what you're peeing out. I don't need to know what your gas is like. That is nothing that I can respond to. Like I am not a doctor. Please go see a doctor. Luckily for me, being emergency medical only requires a specific amount of training, and then you get a certification for it. It's not really something that's entirely degree related. Nor did I actually claim to really want to be emergency medical. It's kind of just something that fell into my lap with this job posting. So, I mean, I have seen guys cut open their hands, like using metal grinders, just sheer on, just gushing. I have seen guys get crushed, not entirely, but like their hand getting crushed. I've had to deal with heat exhaustion within 30 minutes of each other, by the way. I had to call emergency medical, get over to the area, a guy suffering from heat exhaustion, check his blood pressure, all the other vitals, and what's his breathing like, bring him into a cool room here, have some Gatorade or whatever, squencher, and, try and watch him for a little while. Then all of a sudden, within that same 30 minutes, there's another call. Hey, look, we got another guy that's feeling woozy. Okay, well, I got to monitor these two guys. This all happened on a weekend. It was a double hitter. The biggest issue, oh God, the biggest one that I have so far is I had to respond to a car wreck that happened right outside of the company. I'm talking 6:48 in the morning. Maybe a little less than an hour of me going into work. So pretty much the hour that I go into work, there's a medical call about a car wreck. A guy was going about 70 miles an hour and rear-ended a company vehicle. Woo! Okay. That's pretty bad. That's pretty serious. He ended up spinning completely out of control from that hit, going into a swamp area on the side of the road, which could have water moccasins, which could electrocute somebody because of his car. Luckily, some of it was in like the water, and the rest was kind of in a marsh, upper area. Anyway, imagine the front left driver's side of your vehicle completely crushed in around you. This guy needed 7 firemen, 7 with 2 jaws of life to cut that guy out. Me being the first person on the scene, me never having dealt with something this fucking serious, I was scared. Like that is a normal human feeling to be experiencing, especially when you're the first at the scene and you could be responsible for someone's life. I was scared. And that's another reason why I have this recording going on is because I want you to realize that there are people out there that have experienced this. That's why advice kind of exist help you when you're scared. It's to help you whenever you're feeling like things just aren't going right. I hope by listening to this, maybe you have taken something from it. It could just be, maybe I want to go in this direction, or maybe you're even just fine where you are and you're just interested in my stories. I do appreciate you listening to my ramblings. You know, I can't say that I've had the best job history in the past, but hey, I can say that I've at least tried a little bit of everything. And, you know, maybe that's what it takes for a lot of people. Maybe that's what it takes for them to understand the essence of hard work, or what it means to try and steer yourself towards a career or a more balanced future. Have a good one.